America, the greatest country in the world. With unlimited opportunities, great beauty, and beliefs that have shaped the country from the beginning, give America its great name. Although conflict has erupted throughout the past, and even in our current day, America still comes out on top. The beliefs of equality, freedom of speech, concern for the global community, and scientific innovation shape the country and make it what it is today. The peak of racism was in the 1960s. MLK was booming, and racism was just starting to be abolished. However, justice was not coming quick enough, so many blacks in authority wanted to show their involvement with the anti-racism movement. A perfect example of this is at the 1968 Olympic Games. It was the 200-meter dash in Mexico City. USA runners Tommy Smith and John Carlos have been training for years, both black. They fly by the competition and ultimately win gold and bronze. They get to the podium to receive their Olympic medals. On one of their hands was a black glove. They each raised his hand in the air during the climax of the ceremony. This was in response to racism in America and in support of black power. It directly ties to the American value, equality. Blacks felt that they were not being treated as equal and were asking for their American right. This protest brought worldwide attention, which ultimately led America to take notice of racism and try its best to stop it in its tracks. During the early 1960s, television was just starting to gain popularity and was being used in everyday life. Since the Vietnam War was the main topic at the time, television became the main media source of the war. Television and media became even more appealing due to the public's skepticism of the war and confusion due to the lack of government transparency. Then, in late January 1968, the Tet Offensive occurred and marked a major turning point in the media's coverage of the war. The media's coverage switched and became predominantly negative. Images of both civilian and military casualties were increasingly televised. The way television affected the perception of the war was able to happen because of the American values of freedom of speech / freedom of the press and scientific innovation. Freedom of speech allowed the news to cover the war in any way they pleased, positive or negative. Scientific innovation allowed for television to take off and consume Americans for hours a day. Without these values, most of the negative public perception of the war would not have happened, and who knows if LBJ would have lost his popularity. The Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act was huge for Alaskan natives as well as citizens of Alaska. This law, passed in 1971 by President Nixon, gave millions of federal-owned land to Alaskan natives and citizens. This federal-owned land totaled over 148 million acres. To put that in perspective, that is larger than Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia combined, with around 6 million acres to spare. This connects to the value of concern for the global community. Soon before this law, Alaska was hit by the second largest earthquake in human history, measuring in at a whopping 9.2 on the Richter scale. This earthquake brought attention to the federal government to investigate Alaska. They found that Alaska had the worst living conditions in the country by far, and they needed federal aid ASAP. Nixon and the governor of Alaska finally agreed to giving these Alaskans a cut of the land, as well as money for the earthquake. The natives received over 44 million acres of land and were paid over $963 million total. This shows how in times of need, America steps out and helps out, no matter the circumstance. Computers are used in our everyday life like it's nothing, and it's hard to envision a life without them. In 1977, the TRS-80 microcomputer system was released to the public at a $600 price tag, which is roughly equivalent to $2,400 nowadays. Even though it sold only around 100,000 models, it shaped the future for billions. This started the rise of computers and its use in everyday life and directly ties to the American belief of scientific innovation. Before computers, school projects, simple questions, and even finding out about the latest sports result would be difficult to find. A study done at the University of Michigan in 2013 concluded that before the development of the computer, it would take students or citizens using a book an average of 22 minutes to find an answer to a question, assuming that you are constantly at a library and the book needed for the information was at the library you were in. Whereas nowadays, with internet, it takes around 7 minutes. In my opinion, that seems high, and I can get an answer in around 1.5 minutes, but numbers don't lie. This technological advancement would not have been possible if not for the Americans' value of scientific innovation. And who knows what current day life would be like without computers. Overall, the events I talked about in this video would not have been possible without our immense advancements throughout time and our American beliefs. The beliefs of equality, freedom of speech, concern for the global community, and scientific innovation shape the country and make it what it is today. What it means to be an American is a very broad question, but in my opinion, it means to follow these American values and beliefs in one's everyday life.